We're very fortunate that Ashley Hall will be giving our presentation tonight virtually. She's a paleontologist, naturalist, and outreach program manager at the Museum of the Rockies. She earned her BA in anthropology and animal behavior from Indiana University, Bloomington in 2007 and spent 16 years as an informal educator in museums and zoos, including the LA Zoo, Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, La Brea Tar Pits, and Cleveland Museum of Natural History. A passionate science communicator, Ashley has authored 3 children's books and runs a free virtual program on Fridays called Fossil Friday. In her spare time, you can find her crouched with binoculars and a phone with the eBird app open, birding in Bozeman's many birding hotspots. So, by the way, this is what she gave us. So, okay, Corey, I guess we can go on.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am so fortunate to be here with everybody. I wish I could be there in person. And I love Alberta. I love Canada. So thank you for having me on today. And is anyone here? So I know I can't see anybody, but please utilize the chat while I'm speaking because I love seeing comments and I will be asking some questions. So first off, please type in the chat if you are a birder. I know that Canada has a lot of really good birding sites, and I'd love to see who is a birder here. Let's see. Oh, nice. Yeah, hi, Dr. Bamforth. How are you? Awesome, perfect. Well, I'm a birder as well, and of course we all know that birds are dinosaurs, and so tonight we're going to be talking about the evolution of birds. How many of you are familiar with the evolution of birds? And just a little bit, type in the chat if you know the evolution of birds. We've all sort of heard things, but I'm going to go over some really cool things, some really cool discoveries that have been made. And so I will share my screen here. And feel free to grab a beverage. I know it's Friday night, so hopefully you guys can grab a beverage or some dinner or something and join me in learning all about the evolution of birds. So I'm going to try to share here and see what we end up being able to do on this one. Let's see. Aha! All right. Can everybody see okay? Now, I might not be able to see the chat during, but please feel free. Oh, there we go. There we go. Perfect. I can see. All right. Great. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about the origin and evolution of birds. I'm here in Bozeman, Montana, and let's see if I can. There we go. All right, now we're cooking with oil. All right, so I'm an outreach program manager at Museum of the Rockies, and I am a true paleo nerd. Much like all of you, I love dinosaurs, and I've loved them since I was about 4 years old. That's me in the tiny little white T-shirt standing next to Parasaurolophus, my very favorite dinosaur. And dinosaur fever hit me really hard before Jurassic Park, but then when Jurassic Park hit, that really solidified my love of dinosaurs and really helped bring it to life for me. So now I work at Museum of the Rockies. I've had a long history of being in paleontology in many different capacities. And I hope all of you will be able to tune into Fossil Friday, which is a passion project of mine that I've been doing for quite a few seasons now. It's a free program on Fridays. You can watch from anywhere. We have people tuning in from different countries. We did a drawing with mosasaurs today, and we have just a lot of fun. So I hope you guys can join us. So my career has taken quite a few twists and turns. As said in my bio, I'm an anthropologist, paleontologist, ornithologist, naturalist, museum educator, and science communicator, and I've had a really twisty, turny sort of career. I graduated from IU Bloomington, and I really wanted to be a zookeeper, and I love birds. I actually grew up loving birds and bird watching in my backyard. I grew up in Indiana on a pond, and so I would see great blue herons and ducks and all sorts of beautiful birds, especially migrating through. And so that really caught my eye and really carried me through the rest of my life. So I'm still a birder now, And I'm very excited about migration season. As I was saying in the chat, I had pelicans fly over me the other day. And so I went to the LA Zoo for an internship with birds, and I ended up working with all sorts of fabulous birds like flamingos and curassow and vultures and California condor breeding program and all of these amazing places, these amazing birds. And then I realized that I really missed paleontology. And, as a college student, you're sort of like bouncing around for careers, but I've always wanted to be a paleontologist. As you know, there's no real great way to be a paleontologist. You kind of have to pave your own way. And so I ended up working at a slew of museums in California. So Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, the Tar Pits, and the Ray Alf Museum, where I was assistant curator there. And I really love museums. And so I then moved to Cleveland, Ohio, where I worked at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. And by the way, they have the best collection of cartilaginous sharks and Dunkleosteus in the whole world. So if you're able to make it to Cleveland ever, it's just across the pond from Canada. So it's really not all that far. It's a really fabulous place to see some really cool fish. And then I moved to Montana, where I am now at Museum of the Rockies. All right, so there are a lot of misconceptions about bird evolution, and it's definitely not this. Despite funny internet memes, T-Rex did not evolve into birds and definitely did not evolve into chickens. So that's more like it. Just like any evolutionary lineage, the story of birds is complex and definitely not linear. And today I'm going to provide you with a crash course, or should I say a bird's eye view into bird evolution. So let's start with a simple question. What makes a bird a bird? So there are currently over 10,000 species of birds in existence today in a stunning array of sizes, shapes, and colors, as I was saying before. And birds have evolved into almost every niche and have adapted to live in every habitat and every continent in the world. So, what makes a bird a bird? And answers vary depending on who you ask. So, don't ask a physicist. Sorry to any physicists out there. But that's more like it. So, most of you will recognize this diagram from bird books and can even name many of the specific anatomical features on a bird with ease. So, the bigger question is, though, what makes birds dinosaurs? And to investigate this, we have to look at the anatomy. So, what are the features of a bird? So, all organisms that we categorize as birds, including non avian theropod dinosaurs, share the same characteristics: hollow bones, a furcula or wishbone. They're endothermic, which means they create their own body temperature. They lay hard shelled eggs and they have air sacs throughout their skeleton. And yes, birds are the only animals alive today with feathers, and most can fly. And there we go. They share the very same characteristics, of course, as we all know now. So to understand bird evolution, we have to look at all of these anatomical characteristics and trace them back through the fossil record to a shared common ancestor. So for this, we are at the helm of the incomplete and fragmentary fossil record. So we do our best. This phylogeny from paleontologist Steve Brusati shows where birds fit into the larger vertebrate family tree and the relationships of the earliest birds and their closest dinosaurian relatives. The hinge-like ankle that is shared by all archosaurs, so birds, reptiles, dinosaurs, as well as their bipedal posture, evolved 250 million years ago. But wait, we have to address a curious question. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? So does anyone have a guess? Type in the chat if you know which came first, the chicken or the egg. Let's see. Let's see. The egg, I think. Anybody else? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Egg. Yeah, you guys are very smart, I can tell. Of course, the egg, because we're all paleontology minded, right? And biology and all sorts of things, very smart people. So the egg. So the very first amniote egg, that is the hard-shelled egg that could be laid on land rather than remaining in water like the eggs of fish or amphibians, appeared around 312 million years ago. So that question to us science-minded people is pretty simple, but you can share that at your next cocktail party for fun. So the first feathers evolved in the Jurassic period, approximately 165 to 150 million years ago, and they evolved in stages, first as filamentous or fluffy feathers, then becoming more complex through time. Many of these non-avian theropods had these features, but only modern birds have all of them. So to summarize, birds are a group of theropod dinosaurs that have been evolving for the past 150 million years. So what was the first feathered fossil discovery? At first glance, this could be a feather you just walked past on the sidewalk, but it's actually the very first fossil feather seen by human eyes and preserved in 150 million year old limestone. Discovered in the Solnhofen quarry in Germany in 1861, this specimen provided direct evidence of feathers in some kind of ancient reptile, they weren't quite sure what, and offered a glimpse into the possible evolutionary link between dinosaurs and modern birds. Shortly after the discovery of this feather in 1861, a fully articulated feathered specimen was discovered. Meet Archaeopteryx, and most of you are probably pretty familiar with this famous fossil. The first Archaeopteryx specimen, nicknamed the London specimen, was discovered in 1861, and it completely baffled scientists as it shared characteristics of both reptiles and birds. Archaeopteryx are known for their well-developed flight feathers, seen here, with exquisite detail of each feather with a barbule, barbicel arrangement, just like modern birds. There are now 13 specimens, all primarily found in the same Solnhofen limestone formation in Bavaria, Germany. The 13th specimen was actually just acquired by the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, Illinois, where it is now on display, so exciting, as of May 2024, so it's been there for a year. This specimen is the very first Archaeopteryx in a public institution outside of Europe, besides the one in Wyoming, which is also very cool. So if you guys ever get down to Wyoming, that one is an amazing specimen as well. Major kudos to preparators Akiko Shinya and Constance Van Beek, who tirelessly worked on preparing this specimen for research and display. And the most amazing thing is that they were able to prepare this specimen, whereas some of the other specimens were prepared, and a lot of the feathers and soft tissues, could have been prepared better. Maybe they were prepared off a little bit. And so with our knowledge now of soft tissue, they were able to take that into account and really get down to, all the beautiful details. From 1861, we're going to fast forward to August 1964, when Yale paleontologist John Ostrom discovered over 1,000 bones from at least 4 individuals of Deinonychus, a large carnivorous theropod dinosaur or raptor with a sharp sickle-shaped claw on its foot. In place of the old, plodding, cold-blooded dinosaur stereotype, Deinonychus, quote, must have been a fleet-footed, highly predaceous, extremely agile, and very active animal, sensitive to many stimuli and quick in its responses, Ostrom wrote. The dinosaur renaissance, as his former student and paleontologist Robert Bacher later dubbed it, had begun. On the left is a drawing of the Deinonychus described by Ostrom and drawn by then student Robert Bacher, and on the right, separated by only 56 years, is the new and improved Deinonychus by Gabriel Ugetto, now with feathers. And by the way, because feathers evolved 150 million years ago, and we know now that similar theropods had feathers, we now believe that Deinonychus had feathers as well. So fast forward even further in time to the 1990s, when the feathered dinosaur revolution began. In the early 1990s, nobody could have predicted the incredible flurry of dinosaur discovery that was about to begin in China. With the rebuilding of academic institutions after the Cultural Revolution and foreign-trained Chinese paleontologists returning home to prospect, China's Cretaceous and Jurassic era rocks began to give up their riches. Something like 160 species of dinosaur have been described across China since 1990, and the rate of new discoveries may not have peaked yet. It wasn't just a matter of numbers. The remarkable preservation of fossils from northeastern China, particularly the provinces of Liaoning and Hebei, was unique as well. Some scientists call Liaoning a Mesozoic Pompeii, but in its own way, Liaoning is even more remarkable. Repeated volcanic eruptions created a layer cake of fossil beds spanning millions of years, and so far more than 60 species of plants, nearly 90 species of vertebrates, and about 300 species of invertebrates have been identified. So what kind of picture do the fossils from here paint? This beautiful mural was done by artist Zhao Cheng. Liaoning is situated within a vast region whose flora and fauna are referred to as the J-hole biota. The climate was warm and had numerous lakes, and these conditions provided a fruitful environment for plants and animals to thrive. So many individual fossils have been found here that scientists are able to study population dynamics, succession within communities of interacting species, and even predator-prey relationships. Also, the fossils are beautifully preserved with feather details, stomach contents, and even more. Now, we're going to explore about a dozen of some of the most exciting feathered dinosaur discoveries made here and a few other localities. Sinosauropteryx was the first dinosaur taxon outside of Aviale, which is birds and their relatives, to be found with feathers. Covered in a coat of fine filament-like feathers, Sinosauropteryx most likely used its feathers for warmth and display. At only a meter long, this small theropod had a huge impact on science, as it was the first dinosaur to have its coloration described. And that's right, in case you don't know, we now know how to find evidence of coloration in feathers, which is one of my favorite things ever. If you look closely at the specimen, you can see light orangey banding, and upon closer inspection, paleontologist Fucheng Zhang and colleagues found evidence of fossil melanosomes, the cell components that give feathers their coloration. This crucial and groundbreaking study showed that this dinosaur had a raccoon-like bandit mask and a banded tail like that of a red panda. This shook the world of paleontology, and I specifically remember when this came out in the news in 2010. It was such a cool and exciting day. So let's discuss color in birds a bit more, as it's definitely one of the most exciting revelations in paleontology as a whole. So what color were dinosaurs? So birds, or as we should call them now, avian dinosaurs, have evolved a spectrum of colors. From drab to iridescent, birds evolved colors for camouflage, attracting mates, deterring predators, and sometimes as a result of what they eat. Studying modern birds opens up a whole realm of possibilities as to what color non-avian theropod dinosaurs could have been. Researchers look for the presence of melanosomes, or pigment-containing cells, used in high-resolution microscopy. So by comparing the size, shape, and distribution of these melanosomes in ancient feathers to those of modern birds, we can infer the colors of ancient feathers. So for example, rod-shaped melanosomes are often linked to black or dark colors, while spherical ones may suggest red or orange tones. These techniques allow researchers to study the fossilized feathers in detail, and we can now observe their microscopic structure, including melanosomes. High-resolution scanning electron microscopy, SEM, is often used to examine fossil feathers, revealing structures that can provide clues about their original color. Okay, now I'm going to walk you through a bunch of different fossil specimens that help add to our knowledge of the complexity that is bird evolution. And I've arranged the specimens in order of their discovery. Confuciusornis lived 125 to 120 million years ago in the Jianshango beds of the Yishian Formation. At one time, 40 were discovered on a surface of about 100 meters square. Again, at one time, 40 were discovered on the surface of about 100 meters square. That's incredible. This has been explained as a result of entire flocks of birds being simultaneously killed by ash, heat, or poisonous gas following volcanic eruptions that caused the tough stone in which the fossils were found to be deposited as lake sediments. In 2010, the Museum of Nature in Shandong, Tianyu, alone possessed 536 specimens. That's amazing, seeing as how the non-avian dinosaurs we have, right, can be very few and far between. So this is really incredible. This genus is really noteworthy as it was the first that paleontologists were able to determine sexual dimorphism, the difference between males and females. The most significant evidence for sex differentiation in Confuciusornis comes from the tails. Male Confuciusornis had elongated ornamental tail feathers, which were likely used in mating displays. These feathers were much longer and more pronounced than those in females. Females had shorter, less ornate tails, which is common in many bird species today, where males use more conspicuous traits to attract females. So imagine, if you will, like a male peacock, right? And then a peahen. If you've never seen a peahen or a female peacock, they're pretty drab and they don't have the big tail feathers that the males do. In 2010, a group of scientists led by Zhang Fucheng examined fossils with preserved melanosomes. And by studying such fossils with an electron microscope, they found melanosomes preserved in a fossil Confuciusornis specimen. And they reported the presence of melanosomes were of two types, eumelanosomes and pheomelanosomes. This indicated that Confuciusornis had hues of gray, red, brown, and black, possibly something like the modern-day zebrafinch. So now to something a little more recognizable, and I bet most of you have heard of this one. Velociraptor mongoliensis. So while there's some of these bird-like fossils are not as well known, Velociraptor is an icon of pop culture, sparking curiosity of an entire generation of paleontologists by Jurassic Park in 1993. The depiction of Velociraptor changed drastically in 2007 when a big discovery was made. A velociraptor forearm unearthed in Mongolia in 1998 showed clear indications of quill knobs, which are the places where the quills of secondary feathers, the flight or wing feathers of modern birds, were anchored to the bone with ligaments. At 6 feet long and 30 to 40 pounds, Velociraptor was not capable of flight, but it may have used its wing feathers for wing assisted running or helping it stabilize while eating or prey guarding, like hawks do today. The middle image shows where the quill knobs attached, and C, D, E, and F show forearm and feather placement, as well as quill knobs of a turkey vulture. So with this in mind, let's take a look at what the kitchen scene of Jurassic Park would have looked like had it been scientifically accurate. So if you're scared, everybody close your eyes. Ooh, we can all breathe now. Incredibly realistic velociraptors, or as you heard there, Deinonychus there. I can't imagine actually having that be what Jurassic Park would have been like these days. That was created by a really talented person who put that together and made it look super realistic. But holy smokes, I'm glad they're not around anymore because that was terrifying. But also so amazing to see them with feathers. Speaking of feathers, so Anchiornis, this beautiful specimen here, is a genus of crow-sized, four-winged dinosaur that would have been found only in Jurassic rocks from the Tiaojishan Formation of Liaoning, China, approximately 160 million years ago. There are more than 200 specimens known, which is an amazing sample size, and more than most dinosaurs known. The incredible specimen on the right was used for the coloration study and showed that it had evidence of a feathered crest. So if you look really closely, you can see it right about here. The amazing thing now is that the coloration, we know, actually evolved before flight. And just reinforcing that these animals were using color for display purposes for others to see, and implies that they had similar color vision that of modern day dinosaurs. All right, so here's a stunning short video of Anchiornis. I don't know if anyone's seen the 2023 documentary Life on Our Planet, but if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. So with that, let's take a look at Anchiornis. Incredible again. So Life on Our Planet, be sure to check it out this weekend, and I believe it's still on Netflix, so be sure to check it out. Now on to one of my favorite dinosaurs, Microraptor. So like Archaeopteryx, well-preserved fossils of the next fossil, Microraptor, have provided compelling evidence about the evolutionary relationship between birds and earlier dinosaurs. Microraptor had long, pennaceous feathers that formed aerodynamic surfaces on the arms and tail, and also the legs. This led paleontologist Xu Xing in 2003 to describe the first specimen to preserve this feature as a four-winged dinosaur, and to speculate that it may have glided using all four limbs for lift. More recent studies have suggested that Microraptor was capable of powered flight as well. And in March 2012, Li et al. Determined the plumage coloration of Microraptor based on a new specimen, which also showed several other features previously unknown by Microraptor. By analyzing the fossil melanosomes in the fossil by scanning electron microscope techniques, the researchers compared their arrangements to those of modern birds. In Microraptor, these cells were shaped in a manner consistent with black, glossy coloration in modern birds. These rod-shaped narrow melanosomes were arranged in stacked layers, much like those of a modern starling, and indicated iridescence in the plumage of Microraptor. Though the researchers state that the true function of the iridescence is yet unknown, it has been suggested that the tiny dromaeosaur was using its glossy coat as a form of communication or sexual display, much as in modern iridescent birds. So we've looked at a lot of small things, but now on to something a little bit larger. Eutyrannus. Eutyrannus huali is an incredible specimen, and it's actually just smaller than an adult T-Rex. It was named and described in 2012 by paleontologist Xu Xing and is known from three nearly complete fossil specimens. an adult, a subadult, and a juvenile. The described specimens of Eutyrannus contain direct evidence of feathers in the form of fossil imprints. The feathers were long, up to 20 centimeters or 7.9 inches, and filamentous. These feathers covered the whole body and most likely kept the animal warm, as the temperature was around 50 degrees on average Fahrenheit, so pretty chilly. And it's so much fun, I think, to imagine a large, fuzzy tyrannosaur, and paleontologists have had some fun thinking about what it might look like. I remember when this one came out too, and it was just stunning. So here's a really cool artistic depiction of Eutyrannus there with some other dinosaurs too, as well as pterosaurs. And then I really just like this one because it looks so fuzzy and it's so dangerous, but don't you just want to pet it? It's like, why friend shaped, right? If not friend, why friend shaped? Now onto something a little bit different, a little bit out of the box, but I wanted to include some birdie offshoots to flow out the picture a bit more for you. So meet Yichi. Yi is a genus of Scansoriopterygiid dinosaur from the late Jurassic of China, and it's known from a single fossil specimen of an adult individual found in China approximately 159 million years ago. It was a small, possibly tree-dwelling animal, and like other Scansoriopterygids, Yi possessed an unusual elongated third finger that appears to have helped support a membrane made of skin, supported by a long bony strut attached to the wrist. This modified wrist bone and membrane-based plane is unique among all known dinosaurs and might have resulted in wings similar in appearance to those of bats, or maybe even dragons. This fossil shook the paleontology world when it came out, as we hadn't really seen anything quite like it before. Yi's membranous wings were different from other prehistoric bird relatives, suggesting that flight evolved multiple times in dinosaurs. The fossil was checked by an electron microscope on 12 different areas for the presence of melanosomes, and all 9 feather locations showed eumelanosomes. In the head feathers, also pheomelanosomes were present, and on the membranes, only one observation had a positive result of pheomelanosomes. The eumelanosomes of the calf feathers were exceptionally large, and so this is the artistic depiction of what we think Yi may have looked like. So a really unique creature for sure. Now, it's one of my favorites, Lemusaurus. So Lemusaurus is a genus of theropod dinosaur that lived in what is now China during the late Jurassic, around 161 to 157 million years ago. Lemusaurus is crucial to understanding bird evolution because juveniles lost their teeth as they matured, and they developed a beak-like structure in adulthood, providing evidence of how some birds may have evolved from toothed dinosaurs by losing teeth and gaining beaks over time. Again, losing teeth and gaining beaks over time. It's such a cool thing. Additionally, its hand structure with a reduced first finger is seen as a transitional step towards the 3-fingered hand of modern birds. The fossils we've seen so far are permineralized, but now we're going to take a look at something a little bit more well preserved. The dream of all paleontologists was realized in 2017 with the discovery of much of a baby bird in amber. This was actually the 9th specimen of an antiornithine birds, which is an extinct group of birds preserved in amber from Myanmar in Burma. 99 million years ago, this poor baby bird fell from a tree and landed on amber, preserving half of the bird's right side, skin, feathers, and also some plant debris. One reason there might be so many of these baby birds trapped in amber is that they could fly right after hatching, unlike modern birds. So parental care may not have been great in this group, but great for curious paleontologists 99 million years later. Going back to the Jurassic period momentarily, 161 million years ago, a small para-avian dinosaur was discovered in 2014 and published in 2018. And this dinosaur had brilliant color. The fossilized feathers of Kaihong possessed nanostructures which were analyzed and interpreted as melanosomes, showing similarity to organelles that produce a black iridescent color in extant birds. Other feathers found on the head, chest, and the base of the tail preserve flattened sheets of platelet-like melanosomes, very similar in shape to those which create brightly colored iridescent hues in the feathers of modern hummingbirds. However, these structures are seemingly solid and lack air bubbles, and thus are internally more akin to the melanosomes in trumpeters than to hummingbirds. And Kaihong represents the oldest known evidence of platelet-like melanosomes. So this one, when it came out, they said it was a rainbow-type dinosaur, which was a very flashy title in the news. So moving on to other structures besides feathers, we could talk about feathers all day, but one really interesting discovery that was of the first salt glands in a modern bird, or in a fossil bird. Salt glands are located above the eyes and the skull, and the grooves for these glands are especially large in seabirds. So if anyone's been out on the ocean, or if you're a fan of penguins, you've definitely seen salt glands in birds. As seabirds take in seawater from eating or swimming, these glands remove salt from the bloodstream, and excess salt drips out of the salt gland through the nostrils or the beak, which is a really neat adaptation. This allows birds to drink seawater and also to eat salty prey without taking in all of that salt. All right, so you can easily see where salt is excreted in modern groups, especially the pelagic group of birds called tube noses. So with that said, here is a video of a penguin doing a head shake to alleviate its salt glands. So next time you're at the zoo, you should definitely check this out. It's so interesting because I bet you've been to the zoo before and you've seen penguins and we look at how cute they are, but you've never noticed a little head shake there where their salt is being excreted from that gland. So really cool. Check that out next time. All right, so on to something that we're all familiar with. Let's talk a little bit about eggs. So what color were dinosaur eggs? A major piece of the puzzle was revealed in 2017 when molecular paleobiologist Yasmina Weeman of Yale University published the first evidence of dinosaur egg coloration using chemical analysis to detect two pigments, blue-green biliverdin and red-brown protoporphyrin, in the eggs of a 70-million-year-old parrot-beaked oviraptorosaur called Heyuania from China. In studying a wide array of eggshells, no hint of pigment was detected in the eggs of several herbivorous long-necked sauropods or the duck-billed dinosaur Maiasaura, suggesting that these species, which are more distant branches of the dinosaur family tree, had white eggs that they buried in the ground like modern-day turtles and probably covered with vegetation. Okay, so now that we've looked at features of bird throughout the fossil record, what would birding have been like in the late Cretaceous, which is something I think about a lot. If you could time travel, you get that question a lot. What would you go and see? So if you were to time travel and look around, you would see some pretty recognizable birds until you looked more closely. And upon lifting your binoculars, you might see teeth in their beaks and three-fingered hands on their wings. And we think that many of these birds occupied niches just as today's birds do, filling niches like oxpeckers sitting on the backs of dinosaurs like T-Rex and Triceratops, and many other roles. So, what happened to these late Cretaceous birds and why are they not around today? Well, I bet you know a little bit about the KPG extinction as you guys are going to be taking a field trip out there. And of course, we have the KPG boundary here in Montana as well. Birds evolved in the Jurassic, like we said, from theropod dinosaurs, and they're still around today. But the big question is why? So 66 million years ago, all non-avian, so non-bird-like dinosaurs and many other groups of animals went extinct when a meteor that was 6 miles across slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula, causing global destruction. We call this event the Cretaceous Paleogene Extinction, or KPG for short. And one of the biggest mysteries of all is, why did birds survive? Birds are the only group of dinosaurs to survive, but why? And what's the common ancestor of today's birds? Meet the wonder chicken. Makes me laugh too. So the earliest modern bird ever found, published in 2020. Asteriornis maastrichtensis lived 66.7 million years ago, less than 1 million years before the asteroid impact that caused the extinction of all non-avian dinosaurs. The winged and beaked descendants of this quail-sized bird survived that mass extinction event, forming a long lineage that includes modern chickens and ducks. So modern type birds share several key traits such as toothless beaks and fused foot bones. The almost 11,000 living bird species, the paleognaths, which are flightless birds such as ostriches, anseriforms, which are waterfowl, galliforms, which are landfowl and game birds, and neoaves, which are the remaining 95% of living bird species, all share a common ancestor. So, how did these end Cretaceous birds survive the devastation caused by the asteroid? And to do that, we have to look at modern birds today. So, they were small. Many of the surviving bird ancestors were small, which could have made them more adaptable to changing conditions. Their smaller size meant they required fewer resources and could occupy a wider range of habitats. And their ability to fly also helped them escape from areas of severe environmental impact. So, when you think about what happened after the asteroid impact and all of the chaos that ensued, birds were able to move and migrate more than a lot of animals. Now, that still doesn't answer the question, right? Because crocodiles and alligators survived, and many other animals that aren't migratory, but this might be just one piece of the puzzle. They were not specialists. So there's a lot of specialist birds today, and birds had diverse diets back then. So while some were carnivorous, others could have been omnivorous or herbivorous, which would have allowed them to find food in a variety of environments, even when typical food sources were scarce due to the mass extinction event. So not being picky definitely helped. The extinction event likely caused drastic shifts in climate, including cooling temperatures, nuclear winters, darkness, and a disrupted food chain. And birds' ability to adapt to different habitats and their potential for migration may have provided them with a survival advantage during these really, really hard times. Included in that is they are warm blooded. So birds are warm blooded and can regulate their body temperature internally, just like us. This allowed them to survive the cold temperatures that followed the asteroid impact, which was a challenge for many cold blooded creatures, which had to just sort of hunker down and hang out in the mud while they slowed their body and they slowed their metabolisms down. Birds have lots of offspring. So, birds, like other small species, tend to have high reproductive rates, producing many eggs and many babies. This could have helped them bounce back more quickly after the extinction event, which repopulating faster than larger, slower reproducing species. So, birds do this thing where they have some eggs, they take really good care of them, they grow up really quickly, and they're able to reproduce many different times during the year. We're not quite sure what reproduction was like or how frequent it was after the asteroid impact, but that's a really good question that someone should definitely check out. While the exact reason for the survival of birds is still a subject of scientific investigation, these factors likely played a role in their ability to survive the catastrophic changes brought about by the KPG extinction. And paleontologist Steve Brusatte, who is all of our friend and also a great author, as you guys just had his book, says maybe they had beaks and could eat seeds, a nutritious food source that can survive in the soil for decades or centuries, a food bank for when the world went to hell when the asteroid hit. Or maybe these birds nested on the ground so they weren't wiped out with the tree living birds when forests collapsed after the asteroid hit. Or maybe they could fly longer or grow faster or hide easier. We don't really know, but this new discovery tells us that the birds that lived with the last dinosaurs were even more diverse than we used to think. So it's more of a mystery why so few of them survived the asteroid. As you've seen, bird evolution is nowhere near linear. We still don't know why some of these groups didn't survive while others did, which is fueling researchers worldwide to this day. However, all birds that live today radiated from the two groups that survived the mass extinction, the Neornithes and the Paleognaths. About 50 species of birds on Earth today do not belong to the same group as the other 10,000 currently in existence, and this is mind blowing. Known as the Paleognaths, this small group features many of the largest and heaviest bird specimens on our planet, bringing together ostriches, their distant cousins, the South American rheas, as well as emus, and of course the Australian cassowary. Ground-dwelling kiwis and tinamous also complete this family, seen here. None of these birds can fly except for the tinamous, and Paleognath eggs are also somewhat distinct from the rest of the bird population, being larger and sporting thicker shells. Advanced genetic analysis in the 2000s have upended researchers' understanding of in what sequence these birds have evolved and how they're related to each other exactly. The new family tree for Paleognaths offers the opportunity to reevaluate previous conclusions about the group, which in turn could clarify the evolution and lifestyle of flightless modern and extinct dinosaurs. Oh, speaking of which, there are such an incredible variety of birds today. And so, you can go see many different things, many different niches. They have really radiated across the planet. They're incredible animals, and highly recommend if you're not a birder yet, you're going to become one after this because they are just phenomenal. And going back to the beginning part of my presentation in 2012, the mystery of what color the original feather of Archaeopteryx that started it all was revealed. It was black in color and part of the upper primary covert. So that feather was black. And what's really amazing about black feathers is they're really resilient. They're much stronger than any other colored feather. And so for animals like Archaeopteryx, which was living on an archipelago, these animals could have had been beaten up by the sea, by the wind, all these different things. And so black feathers, as you can see on like the wings of seagulls and other birds that are pelagic or live in the ocean, are often dark in color, and that's because of that very same reason. So pretty interesting as far as Archaeopteryx is concerned. So we're still learning from these old bones today. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. And what I've covered today doesn't even begin to fill out the whole picture. So I encourage you to keep learning and keep reading about birds and bird evolution. And we're still learning and discovering new specimens every year. One of the most prolific paleontologists in this field is my friend, Dr. Jingmei O'Connor. And you should definitely have her on if you haven't already, because she has a fabulous talk about Archaeopteryx if you'd like to learn more. So, with that said, thank you so very much. I love Alberta, like I said. I love you guys. Hopefully, we can meet up in the field sometime. And if you ever get down to Museum of the Rockies, give me a holler, and I'm happy to give you a tour. And of course, there's lots of bird resources. So Dr. Jingmei O'Connor has a book called When Dinosaurs Conquered the Skies. This one is very kid-friendly and also adult-friendly, which is great because who wants to sit and read a really thick book sometimes, right? When you can look at some really fun pictures. And then, of course, one of my favorite books that I brought with me today is The Birds of the Mesozoic Field Guide, which is pictured here. And it reads just like a modern day field guide and has information about each fossil specimen, speculative color, if they were juveniles or adults, and all sorts of different things. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. And again, thank you so much for your time and attention. All right, and with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. All right, and go ahead and unmute yourself, Dr. Bamforth. I see you have your hand up.
Oh, sorry, that was clapping, but that was sorry, that was really interesting.
Does
I
anybody
know
have any questions today about birds, either modern or extinct?
I do actually have a question now I think of it. So today one of the weirdest group of birds is the penguins.
Yeah.
And I think that if I recall rightly, penguins actually have a pretty old origin. Like I think they've been around a while. I don't know if you've come across that in your reading, but it's sort of what I've heard is that penguins actually go back a long way.
So penguins, you get some really weird penguins in the Eocene. And so they're definitely one of those bird groups that took off right away. And I think it's also, I speculate, like with any marine environment where you have nothing living in the water, right? So you imagine like mosasaurs and their origin, they started from these little lizard-like things, and that niche was open in the water. The ichthyosaurs had died out. And so then you get the explosion of mosasaurs. The same thing happens with, many other groups like whales, for example. So you have whales that have these little ancestors that are these four-legged things, and they sort of look like an otter mixed with a dog. And they take to the water because that's an open niche, and that's why we have all the whales today. And so the same thing happens with penguins, where that niche was open. Hesperornis and a lot of the other seabirds, birds are really good at sort of like competing, not competing with each other because they have separate niches and the ocean's a really big place. But penguins are definitely one of the older groups because they were able to take advantage of the ocean and not have to fight everybody on land, and so there are some really big penguins that ended up being like 3 or 4 feet tall. So if you want to go on a rabbit hole for penguins later, fossil penguins, they're definitely an interesting group. And one of the interesting things too, that when I was taking a lot of ornithology in school, and you have your bird field guide, right? So you have like, a bird guide like this. Um, they're arranged sometimes by color, but sometimes they're arranged by their evolutionary lineage or like how old they are. And so sometimes when you look at a bird field guide, you'll have to see which ones you have around you. It'll be like loons and geese and like anseriforms, like water birds first. And that's because they're the older groups. And then as it goes later in the book, you get into the songbirds, which are the more sort of the less basal, right? They're the more evolved group of birds. They're just incredibly diverse, really, really, uh, you know, like they speciated really quickly. I always think of songbirds as like dinosaurs 2.0, and especially hummingbirds, because they have these amazing abilities and just diversification. Whereas like the paleognaths, they stay pretty much the same through the last like few million years. And so birds are also like speciating at different rates, which is really cool and interesting. So there's always something new to study.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks so much. Anybody else have any bird nerd questions?
Um, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Les Elliott. I don't see a button to put my picture on, but you don't need to look at a 79-year-old. I have a book by a chap who, I don't know if he's the president or or certainly a guy on the side of what they call BAN, Birds Are Not Dinosaurs. What's
Yes.
happened to that group? I know I mentioned Dr. Curry, and I was a little disappointed when he said he was well, he didn't quite say he was an idiot, but something like you got that impression. I thought, well, science probably progresses by people having a little bit of an argument. So I don't know what he has for his argument. I think he had some osteological features that he thought were unique and didn't show up in dinosaurs. I don't know where it is now, but sounds like he lost. And certainly, and this was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years ago when Dr. Curry was talking about all this kind of stuff, not so much birds, but dinosaurs in general, and then saying birds are you living dinosaurs? So there's this group that says, no, they aren't. And do you even worry about them?
Even in the last 10 years, there's been a huge movement and more specimens and more study into bird evolution. And, the more you study something, the more complex it gets. So there's no question now as to if birds are dinosaurs, but it's sort of like, you know how there are some groups of animals that have convergent evolution, right? So, um, oh gosh, different reptiles on different continents will look the same, but they're not related in any sort of way. Um, besides like their common ancestor. So that happens sometimes, and I'm hearing a little bit more of it with birds, where the Scansoriopterigids, which are the weird membranous winged ones, evolved flight separately. And so it's sort of like, it's the more you study, the more complex it gets. So it appears as though that flight evolved multiple times in these groups. And so, Scansoriopterigids did their thing. Other birds did their thing. There's little offshoots of sort of like animals that try different things and evolution that sort of favors different things in different places. And so there is a little bit of thought there that maybe, just maybe, there's some convergent evolution within birds as well, and flight in particular. But there's no doubt as to whether or not birds are dinosaurs today. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are new discoveries coming that shook up, the world of birds as we know it. Because when Yichi came out, and the Scansoriopterigids were a really cool group. And so that really blew everyone's minds. It was more like a dragon than a bird. But they're still in that theropod lineage. And by the way, this is a cattail. My cat,
I noticed that.
my cat just jumped on my lap.
When
Hi, Salmon.
had a very funny gown on. But anyway.
So yeah, thanks a lot, Ashley. That was a great talk. I was curious. A lot of the samples seem to come from China, and I was wondering if that's a sample bias in your mind, or if there's something in China at that time that kind of was like helpful for bird evolution.
You know, it is a sample bias for sure because we're only getting these little snapshots, right? Because we're at the helm of the fossil record. And so because of these catastrophic events like volcanic action and ash falling down, right? Like the ashfall fossil beds that you've probably heard about in Nebraska, it's like Pompeii where it's like capturing them in time. And so we're only able to get these little, you know, great logger stots with these amazing fossils. Whereas in another, you know, let's say dinosaur park formation or something, you'll get like a metatarsal, you get like a leg bone or a wing bone or something like, or the Hell Creek where I am, you get like these little sort of like sections of birds and not the beautiful logger stot. So it is a product of the fossil record. But also we need to keep going out to these sites like in Dinosaur Park and in the Hell Creek and looking for these things because there was an ornithomimid that had been found with feathers, and it was found in a like semi-coarse sandstone. So the more we're looking for these things, the more, you know, it's sort of like when you get a white car and then you start to see all the other white cars, kind of the same thing. Where if you're looking for it, and we need more researchers in the field to be doing this, right? Hopefully we can find more about these birds in other places and not just in these beautiful logger stots.
All right, Ashley. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for attending. That was a great presentation. I certainly enjoyed it. Hopefully, we can hear more and see more from you later. So I think
Awesome. Well, I
another
hope
round
it-
of applause.
Thank you so much, everybody. Well, hopefully I've sparked your curiosity. Now go forth and research more about birds. And remember that magpie out your window or that little sparrow, that's dinosaurs.